have some deep secrets to show you about your wife. You will hate her forever after this." Pamela's words didn't just slice through the music and laughter of the gala that night. They shattered Benjamin's entire sense of reality. He stared at her, his glass of champagne trembling in his hand, unsure if he had heard correctly. Viewers, let me ask you this. If your spouse's best friend pulled you aside at a glamorous event and whispered such venom into your ear, what would you do? Would you demand the truth immediately? Or would you pretend nothing happened until you had proof? Hold that thought, because Benjamin had only seconds to decide how to play his next move. The evening had started beautifully. The grand ballroom glittered with chandeliers, polished floors reflecting women in flowing gowns and men in tailored suits. It was the annual charity gala, one of the city's most glamorous events, and Benjamin and Annabelle had been invited as a power couple. He, a respected financial consultant, she, a rising star in corporate communications. Together, they looked like perfection, handsome, graceful, admired by all. But beneath perfection, danger often hides. Benjamin had stepped away from Annabelle for only a moment, excusing himself to greet an old business associate. When he returned, Pamela, Annabelle's longtime friend, intercepted him. Pamela looked different tonight. Not the cheerful, bubbly woman he remembered from dinners and vacations. Her eyes burned with urgency. Her lips pressed tight, as if she'd been holding a storm inside her chest. "Ben," she whispered, gripping his arm with unsettling firmness. "I can't keep this inside anymore. You need to know what your wife is doing. She's not who you think she is. I have proof. Proof that will destroy her in your eyes, forever." Benjamin's chest tightened. His instinct was to laugh it off, to tell her she must be drunk, mistaken, jealous. But Pamela didn't flinch. Her eyes locked with his, and slowly she reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. What Benjamin saw on that screen made his blood run cold. Just for a moment, the world tilted. His wife, his Annabelle, was there in those images, in places and poses that left no room for doubt. The man with her was unmistakable too. Sean, one of her colleagues. The closeness, the way her smile looked different in Sean's presence than it did at home. It was all undeniable. And yet Benjamin didn't explode. He didn't cause a scene. That was the first sign that his mind wasn't wired like most men's. Instead, he took a long, slow breath, placed his champagne flute on the table behind him, and looked Pamela in the eyes. "Show me everything," he said calmly, though inside his world was collapsing. That night would become the turning point of his life, the moment when loyalty, betrayal, trust, and revenge would collide in ways he never imagined. But here's the thing. Benjamin wasn't a man who reacted. He was a man who planned, and that was exactly what Annabelle never saw coming. Benjamin drove home that night with Annabelle seated beside him, radiant and humming softly to herself, completely unaware that the ground beneath her was cracking wide open. The gala had ended in applause and photographs, but inside his chest, something heavy and jagged had lodged itself. Pamela's words and those images on her phone replayed in his mind like an endless reel. He glanced at Annabelle. Her profile glowed in the streetlights as she scrolled through her phone, smiling faintly at messages. Was it Sean texting her? The thought pierced Benjamin, but he didn't let it show. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel and forced a smile when she looked up. "Tired?" she asked, her tone soft, affectionate. "Just a little," he replied. It wasn't a lie. He was exhausted. But it wasn't from the gala. It was from holding back the tidal wave of rage and humiliation crashing inside him. Most men, Benjamin thought, would explode the moment they saw such betrayal. They would demand answers, scream, break things, maybe even walk out. But Benjamin wasn't most men. 10 years in the financial world had taught him that patience often yielded more than impulse. You don't pull your investments at the first sign of trouble. You study the market. You wait for the right moment to strike. And in this case, the stakes weren't just money. They were his marriage, his dignity, and the life he had built with Annabelle. That night, after Annabelle drifted off to sleep beside him, Benjamin lay awake staring at the ceiling. Pamela's warning echoed. "You will hate her forever after this." He wondered what Pamela's true intentions were. Was she protecting him? Was she secretly bitter toward Annabelle? Or was this her way of inserting herself into his life? Questions spun like daggers, but one truth remained sharp. Annabelle had betrayed him, and betrayal wasn't something Benjamin could forgive easily. The next morning, Benjamin played his role flawlessly. Over breakfast, he asked Annabelle about her day, kissed her on the forehead before she left for work, and even texted her during lunch like he always did. To her, everything seemed normal. To him, every smile she gave was now suspect. Every laugh was a performance. Every late meeting an opportunity for deception. Instead of confronting her, he began watching. Quietly. Carefully. He studied her expressions when she spoke of Sean. He noticed how quickly she locked her phone screen when he entered the room. He paid attention to her sudden interest in evening yoga classes and networking dinners. The evidence stacked up, not in photos or messages. He didn't need more proof, but in her behavior. Subtle, small cracks in the perfect portrait they once painted for the world. But Benjamin wasn't planning to collect evidence just for the sake of it. No. His plan was bigger. If Pamela was right, and if Annabelle had chosen to gamble with their marriage, then he would show her what it meant to lose everything. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in cold, deliberate silence. And so Benjamin began the quiet work of preparing his revenge, not as a wounded husband, but as a strategist who understood one timeless truth. Sometimes the deadliest punishment comes not from fire, but from ice. The following days unfolded with eerie normalcy. On the surface, nothing had changed. Benjamin still brought Annabelle her morning coffee, still reminded her of her dentist appointments, still slipped his arm around her waist when they walked into dinner parties together. To the outside world, they were flawless. But behind Benjamin's calm eyes, a storm brewed silently. He had shifted from shock to strategy. Every word Annabelle spoke was measured in his mind. Every action she took became a piece of data in his private investigation. He wasn't a jealous man by nature. But now, jealousy was replaced with something colder. Calculation. On Monday evening, Annabelle told him she had a late meeting at work. She kissed his cheek, grabbed her coat, and hurried out. Benjamin waited 5 minutes before picking up his phone and calling Pamela. "Is it him?" Benjamin's voice was low, steady. Pamela hesitated. "Yes, Sean. They've been sneaking around for months. I warned her, Ben. I told her she was gambling with something she could never win back. But she didn't listen." Benjamin's jaw clenched. "Don't tell her I know. Not yet." Pamela's voice softened, almost sympathetic. "You're stronger than I expected. Most men would have blown everything up by now." "I'm not most men," he said, ending the call. At 10:47 that night, Annabelle returned home, humming as though she had actually been in a meeting. Benjamin greeted her with a gentle smile, asked about her day, and even rubbed her shoulders as she sank into the sofa. But inside, his heart was a stone. He began introducing small, calculated shifts. He stopped asking too many questions about her work schedule. He started arriving home earlier than usual, claiming he wanted more quality time. At the same time, he befriended Sean more closely at the office functions they occasionally attended. A handshake here, a drink there, subtle gestures that disarmed suspicion. The irony wasn't lost on him. Annabelle thought she was the one hiding, yet Benjamin was quietly building the stage where her entire illusion would collapse. But even as he played his role, cracks appeared in her performance too. One night, Annabelle laughed a little too loudly at her phone while cooking. Benjamin, leaning casually against the counter, asked, "Something funny?" She flinched just slightly before locking her phone and smiling. Just a meme from a colleague. That small flicker of guilt, barely noticeable, was enough for Benjamin. It told him she was living on edge, and he intended to sharpen that edge further. By midweek, Annabelle began noticing the difference in him. Over dinner, she put down her fork and looked at him curiously. "You've been different lately," she said softly. "Quieter. Is something wrong?" Benjamin smiled, warm and convincing. "Nothing's wrong. I'm just thinking a lot about our future." Her eyes searched his, perhaps for reassurance, perhaps for fear that he had seen through her. He leaned across the table, kissed her hand, and said, "Don't worry. You'll see soon enough." She smiled faintly, but her hand trembled beneath his lips. And in that moment, Benjamin knew something Annabelle did not. Her foundation was starting to crack, and she didn't even know he was the one loosening the bricks beneath her feet. By the end of the week, Benjamin had transformed his silence into a weapon. It wasn't angry silence, it was deliberate, unsettling calm. Annabelle, once confident in her ability to hide her affair, began noticing it in small ways that gnawed at her nerves. When she came home late, expecting the usual casual questions, Benjamin no longer asked. Instead, he greeted her with a smile that felt almost too kind, too measured. One night, she kicked off her heels, ready to spin her excuse about traffic, when he handed her a glass of wine and said simply, "You work so hard, Annabelle. You deserve every minute away." Her throat tightened. That wasn't the response she expected. The next morning, as she dressed for work, Benjamin watched her carefully from the bed. "That dress looks beautiful on you," he said smoothly, "but I bet Sean compliments you more, doesn't he?" Annabelle froze, lipstick trembling against her lips. She turned slowly, searching his face for accusation. But he just smiled like it was a harmless joke, and sipped his coffee. It rattled her more than shouting ever could. At the office, Sean noticed her distraction. "You okay?" he asked quietly as they passed in the hallway. She forced a laugh. "Of course, just tired." But Benjamin had planted the seed, and it was beginning to grow roots. Later that week, Benjamin invited Sean for drinks after work. He shook the man's hand, laughed at his jokes, even toasted to strong partnerships. Annabelle, scrolling through her phone at home, had no idea her lover and her husband were clinking glasses just blocks away. Sean, relaxed and oblivious, leaned in mid-conversation. "You know, Ben, you're one of the calmest guys I've ever met. Nothing rattles you." Benjamin smiled faintly. "If only you knew." Meanwhile, Annabelle's paranoia deepened. She began checking Benjamin's phone when he was in the shower, convinced Pamela might have told him something. She found nothing. She watched his eyes when they spoke, searching for signs of suspicion, but found only warmth. It was unbearable, the not knowing. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Annabelle reached for his hand. "Ben, you've been different lately. Distant. I feel like you're keeping something from me." He turned to her, his gaze tender but unreadable. "Everyone keeps something, Annabelle, don't they?" Her breath caught. The way he said it wasn't an answer. It was a mirror, showing her the reflection of her own lies. Annabelle didn't sleep that night. She lay awake, listening to Benjamin's steady breathing, wondering if he knew, if Pamela had spoken, if her world was already unraveling behind her back. But Benjamin slept peacefully, because for him, the trap was no longer being built. It was already closing. Annabelle's hands shook as she poured herself a glass of water in the kitchen. The words Benjamin had spoken the night before. "Everyone keeps something, don't they?" played on repeat in her mind. Was it just a statement? Or had it been a confession that he knew? She carried the glass to the living room where Benjamin sat, casually reading the newspaper. He looked perfectly at ease, legs crossed, coffee steaming beside him. That composure was maddening. If he suspected, why wasn't he angry? Why wasn't he demanding answers? The silence was worse than rage. At the office, Annabelle tried to bury herself in work, but Sean noticed her distraction. "You've been off lately," he whispered during a meeting. "I'm fine," she said too quickly. Later in the stairwell, he pressed, "Are you worried about Ben? Does he know?" Her heart pounded. "No, I don't think so." "You don't think so?" Sean frowned. "You need to be sure, Annabelle. If he finds out—" "He hasn't," she snapped, cutting him off. But her voice trembled, betraying her own uncertainty. That night, when she returned home, Benjamin was waiting. Dinner was already set on the table. Steak, mashed potatoes, a bottle of red wine opened. It was romantic, deliberate. "You cooked?" she asked cautiously. "Of course," he smiled. "We don't do this enough." They ate, talking about trivial things. Yet Annabelle noticed something different in his gaze. He studied her, not like a husband admiring his wife, but like a chess player analyzing his opponent's next move. Halfway through dinner, Benjamin set down his fork and asked gently, "Do you believe people can hide their true selves forever?" Annabelle's hand trembled around her wine glass. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, shrugged, and took another bite. "Nothing. Just a thought." It was unbearable. She excused herself early, claiming exhaustion, and locked herself in the bathroom. Leaning against the counter, she whispered to her reflection, "He knows. He must know." Meanwhile, Sean grew uneasy too. The following day, he texted her nervously, "We should stop. It's getting risky." Annabelle's reply came fast, "No, I'll handle it." But deep down, she wasn't sure she could. Benjamin, on the other hand, had already begun tightening the strings. He started withdrawing emotionally in small, deliberate ways. He no longer reached for her hand during movies. He no longer kissed her forehead when leaving for work. His presence was still there, but colder, like a shadow that followed without warmth. To outsiders, nothing seemed wrong. But to Annabelle, the shift was suffocating. She found herself replaying every conversation, every look, wondering if it was layered with hidden meaning. The affair that once gave her excitement was now poisoned with fear, and Benjamin knew it. That was the plan. Not to scream, not to confront, but to make her destroy herself from the inside out. Annabelle woke one morning to find Benjamin already dressed, tie perfectly knotted, briefcase at his side. He leaned against the doorframe, sipping coffee, his expression unreadable. "You're leaving early?" she asked, still tangled in the bedsheets. "Big meeting," he said simply. Then, after a pause, added, "Don't wait up tonight. I might be late." Her stomach twisted. Late? With who? She almost laughed at her own paranoia. But that was the poison now. She was no longer sure what was real and what was staged. At work, she tried to shake it off, burying herself in tasks. But when she caught Sean staring at her across the conference room, worry etched on his face, her nerves flared again. "We can't keep this up," Sean whispered later, cornering her near the elevators. Her pulse spiked. "You're backing out?" "Annabelle, your husband isn't a fool. If he knows—" "He doesn't," she snapped. "He can't." But even as she said it, her voice cracked. Sean didn't look convinced. That evening, when Annabelle returned home, Benjamin was seated in the living room. The lights were low, music playing softly, a glass of bourbon in his hand. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. "How was work?" he asked casually. "Fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Good, I spoke with Sean today." Her breath stopped. "Oh? About what?" Benjamin swirled the bourbon, eyes never leaving hers. "Just business." The silence stretched. He didn't elaborate, and she didn't dare ask. Her hands shook as she slipped off her heels and hurried upstairs. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Shoulders tense, eyes shadowed, lips pressed thin. The affair that once thrilled her was now a cage closing tighter each day. At dinner, she tried again to gauge him. "You've been different lately, Ben." Distant. He looked up, his face calm, almost tender. "I'm just watching. People reveal themselves if you give them time." The words struck like a knife. Annabelle barely ate another bite. That night, she dreamed of Pamela, smiling coldly, whispering truths into Benjamin's ear. She woke drenched in sweat, convinced that the betrayal had already been laid bare. The next morning, she snapped at Sean. "Why do you look at me like that? Like we're guilty of something?" "Aren't we?" he replied quietly. The question hung heavy between them. Back home, Benjamin moved with deliberate normalcy, but his silence spoke volumes. Every gesture, every calm smile, every casual question was a reminder. He knew more than he revealed. Annabelle found herself checking over her shoulder, rereading messages twice, deleting texts within seconds. The paranoia wasn't just eating her alive, it was consuming the affair itself. And Sean could feel it too. By week's end, the once thrilling secret romance had turned into a burden neither could carry. But Benjamin carried everything lightly, because he wasn't the one unraveling. He was the one pulling the threads. By the start of the next week, Annabelle was unraveling faster than she could cover it. Her once flawless composure had cracks, snapping at co-workers, fumbling during presentations. Her smile now a thin mask that trembled under scrutiny. Sean noticed it too. One afternoon he caught her outside the office, pacing by her car. "This is getting out of hand," he whispered urgently. "He's closing in on us. I can feel it." Annabelle's eyes darted around. "No, you're just paranoid." Sean grabbed her wrist. "No, Annabelle. Look at yourself, you're falling apart. He knows. He's just waiting for the right moment." She yanked her hand free, heart pounding. "Stop saying that." But deep inside, she knew Sean was right. Benjamin's silence wasn't ignorance, it was precision. That evening, Annabelle came home to find Pamela sitting in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, chatting comfortably with Benjamin. The sight froze her. Pamela turned, smiling faintly. "Annabelle, I dropped by. Hope you don't mind." Benjamin rose, kissed Annabelle on the cheek, and excused himself upstairs, leaving the two women alone. The silence stretched. Annabelle's throat tightened. "Why are you here?" Pamela tilted her head. "To see how you're holding up. You don't look, well." "Don't play games with me," Annabelle snapped. Pamela's smile faded. "Games? Annabelle, you built this mess yourself. You think secrets stay buried? They don't. They rot, and eventually, the smell reaches everyone." Annabelle's voice cracked. "Did you tell him?" Pamela swirled her wine. "Tell him what?" The ambiguity was torture. Annabelle's knees weakened and she sank onto the couch. "Pamela, please. If you care about me, don't ruin this." Pamela leaned forward, eyes sharp. "If I didn't care, I wouldn't be warning you. Ben is not the kind of man you play with. He doesn't explode, he waits. And when he strikes, it's final." Tears welled in Annabelle's eyes. "What do I do?" Pamela set the glass down, her expression almost pitying. "That's not my answer to give. But you'd better choose quickly, because the walls are closing in." She stood, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she paused. "One last thing, Annabelle. When Ben looks at you and smiles, don't mistake it for forgiveness. It's a countdown." The door clicked shut, leaving Annabelle trembling. Upstairs, Benjamin had heard every word. He stood by the window, watching Pamela leave, his reflection calm against the glass. She had played her part perfectly, whether Annabelle realized it or not. Annabelle staggered into the bedroom later, eyes swollen, hands shaking. She climbed into bed beside him, but lay awake long after he drifted into steady sleep. Every creak in the house, every breath from his chest felt like a reminder. Her time was running out. And Benjamin? Benjamin wasn't asleep. He was waiting. Benjamin chose a Thursday night for the reveal. Not a Friday, not the weekend. Thursday. A weekday that carried the illusion of routine. He made reservations at a quiet restaurant, dimly lit, with soft jazz curling through the air. Annabelle thought it was a gesture of romance, a chance to reconnect. She dressed carefully, a navy dress that once always drew compliments from him. But when she descended the stairs and saw him waiting, she noticed something different. He wasn't looking at her with admiration. He was looking at her like he had already said goodbye. At the restaurant, Benjamin was charming. Too charming. He asked about her day, complimented the food, raised his glass to new beginnings. Annabelle smiled weakly, but her hands trembled on the stem of her wine glass. Halfway through the meal, Benjamin leaned forward. His voice softened. "Annabelle, do you remember our wedding vows?" Her breath caught. "Of course I do. Loyalty, trust, partnership." He said the words slowly, each one heavy as a stone. "Do you think we've honored them?" Her throat tightened. "Why are you asking me this?" He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a phone on the table. Her blood froze. On the screen, photos, videos, undeniable proof. Annabelle and Sean, together, intimate, exposed. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. Benjamin's expression didn't shift. "I've known for weeks. Pamela showed me everything." Annabelle's lips parted, desperate to explain, but he raised a hand. "Don't insult me with excuses. I don't need them." Tears blurred her vision. "Ben, please." "It wasn't." "Stop." His tone was calm, measured. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you what comes next." Annabelle's chest heaved. "Next?" "I already told Sean's wife. She knows everything. And by tomorrow morning, your office will know too. The board, your colleagues, everyone." She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Benjamin leaned closer, his voice like ice. "You gambled with everything you had, your marriage, your career, your reputation, and you lost." Her tears spilled. "Ben, don't do this. I can fix it." He shook his head. "You can't fix betrayal. You can't unmake a choice." The weight of his silence pressed harder than any scream could. Around them, the restaurant buzzed softly with laughter and clinking glasses, a cruel contrast to the destruction unraveling at their table. Annabelle reached across the table, desperate. "I love you." Benjamin pulled his hand back slowly. "You loved yourself more." He stood, laid money on the table, and looked at her one last time. "I'm not staying in a marriage built on lies. I've already secured my future without you. Tonight is your reminder that some mistakes can't be undone." And with that, he walked away. Annabelle sat frozen, her world collapsing, the echo of his footsteps, the sound of her life falling apart. Annabelle didn't remember how she drove home that night. The city lights blurred through her tears, the steering wheel trembling under her grip. By the time she walked into the house, her body felt hollow, like the life had drained from her bones. The rooms looked different now, colder, emptier. The framed photographs on the wall mocked her. Smiling vacations, anniversary dinners, holidays with friends, memories of a love she had traded for fleeting excitement. She stumbled into the bedroom and found a suitcase on the floor. Benjamin's side of the closet was bare. Panic surged through her. She ran to the drawers, empty. His shoes, his suits, his cologne, all gone. On the nightstand sat a sealed envelope with her name. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside, Benjamin's handwriting was steady, controlled. "Annabelle, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I gave us everything. Loyalty, love, and trust. You gave those pieces to someone else. There is no forgiveness for a betrayal so deep. I wish you well, but I won't be standing beside you anymore. Benjamin." The letter slipped from her hands. A sob tore through her chest. The following morning, the fallout began. Sean's wife arrived at his office unannounced, fury blazing. She had the photos, the videos, all forwarded from Benjamin. The confrontation was explosive, echoing down the corporate halls. By noon, both Sean and Annabelle's reputations were ruined. Gossip spread like wildfire. Whispered conversations stopped when she entered a room. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were reassigned. Her career, once a shining star, dimmed within days. Pamela visited once more, standing at the doorway, watching Annabelle break. "I warned you," she said softly. "But you didn't want to hear it." Annabelle fell to her knees, begging. "Why, Pamela? Why would you do this to me?" Pamela's gaze was steady. "I didn't do this to you, Annabelle. You did this to yourself. Secrets always surface. You just never thought yours would drown you." With that, she turned and left. Meanwhile, Benjamin moved into a quiet apartment overlooking the city skyline. For the first time in weeks, he slept soundly. He wasn't celebrating. There was no joy in destroying the person he once loved. But there was peace in reclaiming his dignity. Because some wounds can heal, but betrayal leaves a scar that never fades. Loyalty is not something to gamble with. Once broken, it cannot be bought back, no matter the apology, no matter the regret. Benjamin walked forward, alone but unbroken, leaving Annabelle behind with nothing but the echo of her choices. And that was her punishment, living every day with the weight of what she lost.